G'day expats and ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Expat Chat, episode 173 today. And as always, I'm joined with my co-host, the man from the war zone, the founding director of the Atlas Wealth Group, friend, colleague, mate, mentor, Brett Evans. Good morning, mate. How are you?
Good morning, mate. Good morning. Good morning. It's when is a treaty not a treaty, or when is a balancing out. So and folks, g'day, welcome. Good to see everyone and hear everyone. As always, joined by the guru from Australia, Mr. Managing Director of the APAC region, James Ridley. G'day, mate.
Good morning. Now, Brett, there's been a lot going on. It's almost hard trying to find the best topic to talk about because the news, the media, the legislation changes afoot back in Australia, it all just seems to be, I guess, changing and moving way too quickly to keep up, to be honest. The most recent one, which I think we're going to get a really good read on as the budget comes out, is the changes to the property market tax legislation, capital gains tax back in Australia very, very soon. It's capturing a lot of eyes.
Mate, it is. It's almost like a dartboard of ideas we could talk about today, but that's one that affects most Aussies because, as we all know, property is like a religion for Aussies, and so a lot of people are affected, whether you're a resident or non-resident. Albo and Chalmers have got some pretty big ideas, and mate, the budget this year in May, it's going to be a pretty interesting one. So let's get the show on the road. Let's get the compliance tag out of the way. All the information we're going to share with you good folks today should be treated as informational and educational purposes only. Please do not construe this as personal advice. If you do need to get personal advice, speak to a specialist like Atlas.
Absolutely, mate. And yeah, I mean, what we're talking about today, it really started late last year as they started to talk about the capital gains tax discount on property sales. Before we probably jump into that, I think we should probably just unpack what the concession is.
Yeah, look, essentially what you're referring to is more so investment properties than main residence.
Yep.
So if you're an Australian tax resident and you hold a property for greater than 12 months, you essentially get a 50% discount, what we call a Ramadan sale here in the UAE. And what it means is if you've made $500,000 on a investment property, when you sell it, you've crystallized that gain. You're not actually going to be taxed on that 500. They'll give you a very nice 50% discount and you'll only be taxed on the 250. So mate, run through with the folks what the proposal is and I guess permutations and how that looks.
Yeah, yeah, there certainly are some permutations. So there was a final report released by the Senate Select Committee earlier this month about, I guess, the support it's received from Labor, some independents, the Green senators as well. And then Chalmers is obviously licking his lips because he's thinking, great, this is something we've got a bit of support behind now. So this is something we could definitely legislate as well. There's a couple options which are being floated, and they're actively modelling these at the moment. So firstly, reducing the CGT discount concession from 50% down to 33%. And you're only able to access this kind of concession right now if you've owned the asset, as Brett said, for more than 12 months. Reduce the CGT discount from 50% down to 25%. So obviously a lot more aggressive. And then the other option they are considering is returning to the Keating era and in bringing back that indexation method around cost-based adjustment and obviously paying tax on real inflation adjusted gains. That was quite complex back in the day. So those are the three main options they are considering or what they've told essentially the public. And we're reading from the tea leaves, as always, as we come into the budget. So it's hard trying to model any scenario, but they're obviously actively modeling what would generate the most revenue. As well as that, they're also talking about trying to play with negative gearing to a degree. There's a separate proposal afoot right now where they're considering capping deductions to a maximum of 2 investment properties per person. That's a massive one. That is a massive one. I really feel like the last um, probably 10 years, even more recently, 5 years. There's been a lot of like property spruikers, negative gearing, buyer's agent firms, building wealth through property only, replacing your income, all those sort of things. And that will really impact that industry if they sort of legislate something like that. Um, no grandfathering and doing sort of a phase transition as well. There's a lot of movements going on, but that's essentially what the proposal and where it stands at the moment. There's sort of three options plus an additional separate proposal around the negative gearing side. So a lot to unpack there.
I think it's also important to note that for expats on the call, negative gearing can't be used by expats. 50% discount can't be used by expats. That was phased out May 2012. But how it does affect expats is what it does to the property market. So, like you said, if people are attending those RSL halls, listening to the property spruikers, and every time you make 10% of equity, you rip it out and buy the next one, and it's that conga line. It's they're the ones that are going to be. It's not so much the mums and dads with one investment property. They're going to be really hit. They'll feel it if the property's running a negative cash flow. It's the ones that have built a whole portfolio on the premise that they can get money back for the difference. And so as far as expats are concerned, the rules haven't changed for them, but it will affect the market, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's the goal here, the whole housing affordability piece. The coalition, they did release a dissenting report that's just to reflect that the housing affordability issue, it's caused by the supply. It's not caused by taxing or a lack of tax. So that was, I guess, Liberals, the Coalition National Party rebuttal to what this proposal will do. But I just can't see it really fixing the problem anytime soon. I just feel like this whole housing affordability issue, like it's mainly been born about from the previous governments, to be honest. And probably they should have had some restrictions on foreign investment. Obviously looking at Sydney and Melbourne markets through the late 90s, early 2000s, they all just exploded. And that sort of led us to where we are right now. Whether this is something which will be a moving target, but also have a flow-on effect as, flowing over into the main residence exemption as an example. Like, does that mean, okay, if we're going to do this, might as well play with the main residence exemption at the same time?
Yeah.
A good example of this kind of legislation for our listeners is uh, Division 296 and super tax. So when that was first announced, the government wanted to essentially tax unrealised gains within your super fund if your balance was over 3 million, both applying to a self-managed super fund, a wrap super fund, or a retail industry super fund. Now, once that was coming through, received a lot of consultation, and then they went back to the drawing board and they updated it to say, okay, we won't tax you on unrealised gains, growth. We'll only tax you under ordinary concepts. So you actually have to sell an asset, you have to realise the income, receive the cash. And why I'm saying this is that there is a due process that any sort of legislation that they propose within a budget, it goes through obviously a lot of process, a lot of back and forth, a lot of consultation until it gets spat out the other side, which usually looks something similar or a little bit different. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I don't think there'll be much of a change on the property market. I'm really interested to see what's going to look like with the grandfathering rules.
Yeah.
But again, they're just giving accountants more work if they're going to grandfather. It needs to be sort of all or nothing, I think.
Look, I think so. No, I agree. It's property's a slow reacting beast, so it's not going to suddenly free up all this supply and create all this revenue for Canberra tomorrow, even in the next 6 months. But to me, there's got to be this conga line effect between a lot of these things, and we're obviously talking about interest rates now. And Michelle and her crew catching up. Was it 3 weeks time or 4 weeks time? 3.5 weeks time, I think it is. Yeah, just before the
budget's released.
Yeah, and it's pretty much a lay down misère that she's going to raise rates again, obviously due to inflation and stuff like that. So if they're raising rates, mortgage costs will go up. Properties that are negatively geared, heavily, really have to rely on negative gearing. And if Chalmers does have his way and gets rid of that or grandfathers it out in a shorter period of time, then at that point, that's when we might see more supply free up. But I think it's also too, I agree, the taxing of property is not going to free up supply, but what it may do is it may increase the amount of supply on stock on the market and also adjust people's expectations of what you should pay for a 2-bedroom apartment, 3-bedroom townhouse, 4-bedroom house. So it will have a long play effect, but what it does is probably just puts a bit of uncertainty around the property I mean, people still need a place to live. That's a given. So from a
Yep.
PPR point of view, as long as they don't reduce the MRE threshold down to 500K,
Mm.
I think that's what the US runs at, isn't it? 500K, the US, any gains less
Yeah.
than, yeah,
Yeah, that's right. If you're filing jointly, it's 250 as an individual if you don't have a spouse, but 500K US, that's the capital gains, and then it's just treated like an ordinary like investment asset after that. Yep.
yeah. So I think, look, when you look at that, it's going to be a combination of a lot of things that build up for it. So you're not going to suddenly see the sale signs springing up on the streets tomorrow. If they do, it's more so as a function of the war as opposed to tax legislation. But people do need to start to factor these things in. You know, obviously, when we talk about financial plans and strategy and structure, you need to bake in that level of uncertainty if you are looking at doing something before the budget next month. So that to me is a big one, is just keep that in the back of your mind. You know, always sort of not play devil's advocate, but just plan for the worst and hope for the best, I guess is the best way to describe it. Because if you are talking to one of those property mobs who are really hitting up expats, we've seen a big ramp up in the last 6 months about property's the only way to buy property, invest in Australia. Just be careful. Just be careful.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but you just need to, if it all hinges on 100% negative gearing and all these sort of scenarios, your plan may fall apart. So you just need to keep that in the back of your mind.
Yeah, right now, biggest risk is that legislative risk, isn't it? And uh, I mean, if they legislate something like this, I can see people leaning on entities, but the banks earlier in the year already sort of shut down a lot of lending and
Yep.
entity lending with trust and other
With
things.
trust,
So
yeah.
yeah, so they're sort of closing, or I mean, other factors, banks, lenders, they're closing how much they'll lend in entities, and then you got this legislative risk, which is closing maybe the benefit of having multiple investment properties. So it's going to be interesting. Like, yeah, I think you could actually, if it is legislated and the lending environment stays rather tight, you'll see people looking at other asset classes, debt recycling via shares and other things. It's a really powerful tool, debt recycling, especially if you're in Australia and
Yep.
you're a high income earner. Absolutely, no question. So you could start to see people thinking a little bit differently about ways that they build wealth rather than just locking it all into property. I feel like, as we know, Australians, we've got a love affection with property, but
Yeah.
this might be the change.
Look, and it'll never go away, but just maybe the importance of it will diminish to a certain degree. Yeah, I think
Yep.
that's how I'm viewing it, is rather being this sole way of creating wealth, it should be one of four pillars as part of, someone's financial plan.
Yep.
Obviously you need a place to live, but and I think also too, we always, have a bit of a joke about or people who meet us for the first time and they've taken advice off their parents. So their parents' super didn't exist. So their super was buying 5 properties when yields were sort of 5 to 7%. And you live
Mm.
off the rental income of those properties. And then when you need some money, you sold a property. Um, super absolutely smashes that out of the water from a net tax position. That's an easy one. But
Yep.
also these days, properties are yielding 1 to 3%. So they're high growth, low income. So if you do have to have a property that you want to live on as a retirement strategy, it has to be yielding at least 4 to 5 net
Oh yeah.
after all it costs
Won't,
just to be able to make it work.
you won't get that though. Like, as
No,
we
you
know,
won't. Yeah,
like I haven't met anyone that successfully retired just off residential
no,
like income, even if their debts are all paid off, because you just can't. Yeah, like,
it's a
and there's
unicorn.
too much. There's too much uncertainty around making sure you've got like a healthy buffer for lumpy expenses. Like you just can't rely on it. Whereas like if you can transition that kind of capital into a liquid asset and that generates you 7 or 5% or 7 to 8.5%, then you're drawing a tax-free income stream from that. You're obviously winding down the capital over time, but it's giving you that comfortable living standard compared to having it all locked in a lumpy asset, which is a lot harder to offload, especially this year. Stock turnover is starting to trend towards, I think auction clearance rates are starting to trend
In the
below
50s.
50%. So
Yeah, below 50s. Yeah.
yeah, I haven't seen that for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So that's a really good example of a big slowdown in the property market.
Also to consider that once again, I always love to look at the net tax position. So if you are looking to retire and you have a portfolio of properties giving you, say, $100,000 a year, whether it's in a trust or whether it's in your joint names, you're going to be paying 30% tax. So
Mm.
you'll be getting net 70. as opposed to a
Yep.
super fund that's giving you 100 grand a year, you get 100. So if you don't like money and you like giving it to the ATO, then 30K is 30K at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
I promise you that Canberra will spend the money wisely and well. But yeah, certainly just you need to sort of take that mindset in terms of what's happening in the future, because yeah, it is a big thing. When you're managing
Yeah.
your financial affairs, it's like driving a super tanker. You don't just turn it quickly. It sort of turns gradually, and sort of things don't change overnight. So just
Yep.
yeah, when you are considering your situation now, put on your 10-year hat, your 20-year hat, and say, where does this fit into my whole plan? Because if you are relying on negative gearing to make the numbers work, revisit it,
Mm.
because it may not
Mm.
work after next month.
No, it won't. And I mean, we'll unpack the budget very quickly as well. So keep an eye out. There'll be webinars left, right, and centre on the budget to see how it applies to expats as well as just broader Australians. And I think we're all going to be really interested to see what they're going to be playing with regarding tax concessions, lack of tax concessions. Are they going to increase the tax rates as well, decrease them, GST? I think Labor, they're in for a while now. So it's time to
Yeah,
break out the wish list and see what we want.
probably another two terms by the looks of it. So, mate, I think
Yeah, for sure.
we've educated, we've entertained the folks out there. So let's let them finish their walk and the dog on the treadmill or trip to work in the car. We'll wrap it up there, folks. Lots coming up. We've got Singapore happening this month. We've obviously got budget webinars and seminars going on, even some other webinars as well too. So have a look at the events page on our website, and James will let you get on with your day.
Sounds good, mate. Have a good day over there. Keep your head down in that war zone. That
Ducking and
ceasefire
weaving.
was an absolute joke. So,
When is a ceasefire not a ceasefire?
oh God. Yeah, it's like Groundhog Day.
It is,
All
mate.
right, mate. Well, you have a good day. Thanks for
Thanks, mate.
listening. Speak to you
Cheers.
on the
Thanks,
next
guys.
episode. Cheers.